versus the more balanced approach from Lorenzo. So let's see how this match is going to unfold as we get into game number 1. Right off the bat for Lorenzo, it's going to be the Annihilate and the Corviknight versus the Jumpluff and Torkoal from Joe.
I like this lead from both players. The immediate threat of a final Gambit from Annihilate is great. It just means that, you have to be careful what you use this turn, else you might just lose something. But the Torkoal Jumpluff lead means that you are able to outspeed this Choice Scarf Annihilate, possibly set up a Tailwind, possibly try and put it to sleep with Sleep Powder. You have to worry about Terra Grass and the Annihilate. That could be something Lorenzo opts for to get around that possible Sleep Powder. But big threats from both players coming out right away.
You could go for the Terra Grass on the Annihilate, but then you're going to leave this Corviknight very vulnerable. We saw what Joe was able to lock into, and I feel like you always need to expect that some type of Fire-type attack could be coming out from this Torkoal that could put you in a really bad spot.
And the only way that Torkoal doesn't get an attack off this turn is if Final Gambit comes through. And if that is the case, the Torkoal gets knocked out, which is good and all, but you also lose the Annihilate immediately, which could be an important piece later.
Well, here's the Terra. It is going to be committed onto the Corviknight, so it is going to be a Dragon Terra for this Corviknight, making it be able to take some of these Fire-type attacks just a little bit better.
The Dragon Terra comes out immediately, which means it is no longer a ground resist. There are no ground resists at all on Lorenzo's team. Tailwind does come through, though, boosting the speeds, and Final Gambit as well from Annihilate.
Yeah, but the Final Gambit into the Torkoal with that one-hit knockout means that it is going to be the Terra expended, but maybe Joe actually wants that. You were calling out that now there is going to be no ground resist here for the Corviknight, so even just the threat of that alone might have given Joe exactly what he wanted, but the Tailwind gets matched here from Lorenzo, so even if Joe was able to get the speed advantage, that is gone.
I really like the Tailwind from Joe there. You might be tempted to go for that Sleep Powder into Annihilate, but like you called out earlier, Rosemary, that can miss, and if you miss Sleep Powder and the Final Gambit goes off, you are so far behind in that case. So making sure Tailwind gets up, now bringing in the Garchomp. I really like this play because Garchomp threatens a big one-hit knockout onto the opposing Garchomp. We might see a Speed Tie come through. I think a lot of trainers would just opt to make their Garchomps as fast as possible, and given that Tailwind is up on both sides, it could come down to how this training has been done, or just a coin flip.
But here's where this Terra becomes really important, and also the Tailwind from the Corviknight. Joe is now going to be able to pressure with Encore, so this Corviknight has an option.
Yeah.
Do you stay in to try to take the Encore, or do you switch out? And know that you are very susceptible to this Garchomp being able to get a huge attack off into that slot.
Also, Lorenzo has nothing left he can Earthquake next to. If you do opt to go for Earthquake, you have to hit your own partner.
Jumpluff goes for the Encore, though, which is going to fail because that Corviknight switched off the field. And the Garchomp is going to be faster, going for the Breaking Swipe. It is going to drop the attack of this Garchomp, which could be important for the overall damage output. But you are able to survive and fire off a huge attack of your own. The Dragon Claw is going to be so close to getting the knockout, but not quite enough.
Big Breaking Swipe there. That's really good damage onto both targets. Of course, one more attack from Garchomp on Lorenzo's end will knock it out because of that Life Orb. And Primarina does come in here, but it cannot Terastallize. Leaf Storm actually threatening a big amount of damage, especially if Joe's is able to win the Speed Tie with his own Garchomp. A combination Earthquake and Leaf Storm could spell doom for this Primarina. The Breaking Swipe attack drop coming in huge there as well, of course. It allowed the Garchomp on Lorenzo's end to survive the combination of the Dragon Claw and the Life Orb recoil. But I still think advantage has to go to Joe here. You've gotten so much damage into Lorenzo's Garchomp to the point where one more attack knocks it out, but Sleep Powder comes through and will miss.
That's the accuracy coming back to bite Joe, but it is going to be the Earthquake, where we get a confirmation that it is going to be a speed tie between these two Garchomps as Joe's gets a chance to move first. Gonna lose a little bit of HP there to the recoil from the Life Orb, but the Hyper Voice, this is why you would have loved to be able to put this Primarina to sleep. You would have had this Garchomp for another turn.
You have Garchomp for another turn, but Typhlosion will come in here. The Primarina notably is not the Throat Spray set, so it does not have that special attack boost. The sun is still up, so you have the option to go for these huge eruptions. Joe still has the option to Terastallize, and this Typhlosion is Terra Fire. Even though there are two Pokemon that resist on Lorenzo's side of the field, this could still be some huge damage, especially considering Leaf Storm is still in play.
There's still 2 turns of Sun available as well, so enough for this Hisuian Typhlosion to be able to get something done in the next couple of turns. Tailwinds being matched here means that neither player is necessarily going to have a speed advantage once those expire, but it's time to actually use this Terra and give this Hisuian Typhlosion a bit more oomph.
Will Terastallize into a pure fire type. No need for ghost typing when Eruption does so much damage. It's going to be really fun to see how much this does, Rosemary. The jump left should attack first, but Primarina actually going straight for Protect.
Why not? You want to try to bypass a couple of these turns of Sun. That is going to be a big factor for you, but it is also going to keep this Primarina safe from this Leaf Storm that could have come out from this jump left. So as we see this Eruption, it can only hit the Corviknight, but it's still going to do a lot here in the Sun with the Terrifier. You got the huge attack burst, and it's just a one-hit knockout.
Oh.
The crit.
There it is. Okay, even with a critical hit, that's crazy. Corviknight is so bulky, and that is a resisted Eruption, but with the Sun, with the Terrifier, with the Choice Specs at full HP, that is so much damage coming out from this Typhlosion. And if this game wasn't favored for Joe already, it certainly is now. Primarina also resists, but we've clearly seen that just does not matter.
Well, the Encore is just going to be the safe bet here. Even if you do get the double Protect, it's not going to matter in the long run, and you are going to see the Eruption still be able to finish off the job just like that.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
And yeah, so going back a turn though, the turn that Corviknight got knocked out, the Protect on Primarina in front of something with Encore, you think maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But since Jump Left didn't have Protect, it had to go for an attack that turn. I think that what Lorenzo was going for was, protect Primarina, hope that Corviknight survives Eruption, which obviously didn't work out super well. But if it does, you can Brave Bird the Jump Left, get rid of that Encore, get rid of the Grass type threatening your own Water type, and then hope that Primarina is able to weather the storm of this Typhlosion. I don't think it would have been able to anyway at that point, because even if Corviknight didn't get knocked out with that critical hit, it would have been in range for one more Eruption, and the Primarina...
Or knocked itself out to Brave Bird
true,
anyway.
Very true. So that... the crit there, I don't know if it was super game warping, but obviously it's fun to see Eruption knock out something on a resist.
Oh my gosh. It kind of brings me back to when Miraidon was using the Volt Switch into Incineroar and just getting a one-hit knockout with that.
I played at a local in Regulation G, and I had a Whimsicott, and a Miraidon Volt Switched it and just knocked it out. Like, that's a resist.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's just the power of Hisuian and Typhlosion with Choice Specs behind it, no less. It's going to be able to do a ton, regardless of whatever move it's going to be locked into. But Joe knew that he was going to have the speed advantage. Just go for the Eruption at full power and finish up the game one that way. So as we enter into this game number 2, it's going to be up to Lorenzo to try to figure out how to deal with that lead. You were able to get the final Gambit off immediately to knock out that Torkoal before it could get a big attack off with something like that Overheat, but you also opened up the door for Joe to bring in that Garchomp, knowing he's going to be able to survive a Dragon Claw. There isn't a one-hit knockout potential here on Lorenzo before this Garchomp gets to move. I
think that was a perfect showcase of what Joe wants to be doing with this team. Get the Sun up early, get the Jump Left support going, and even like losing the Torkoal there, you lose a Pokemon, but you get the free switch, and that's kind of what the Eject Pack Overheat is for anyway, is getting that switch on the first turn as Tailwind gets set up. So really, I think a net positive, because you did force the Terrestrialization out of the Corviknight on turn 1. That meant that Lorenzo lost a really important tool. Obviously, the Corviknight survived that turn, but the threat of Terrestrializing something is always something you have to worry about, and that threat was just gone. Everything that you saw on the field would remain the same typing the rest of the game, and that's just what Joe was able to take advantage of.
Well, here's a big switch up from both of our players. We're going to have Lorenzo with the Sneasler out at the gates, and for Joe, it's going to beat the Typhlosion immediately.
This is actually so good. Sneasler is unable to damage Typhlosion in any meaningful way. Fake Out and Close Combat are both entirely ineffective, and Dire Claw will be resisted thanks to that Ghost typing. So this is a pretty free Eruption right off the bat, and especially considering I don't think Torkoal gets knocked out by a double up here either, so you have the option to go for that Overheat, use the Eject Pack to reposition, and possibly get that Jump Off in. And this is a perfect start for this Typhlosion.
There are always room for some Dire Claw shenanigans,
that is
though.
So true.
So I don't want to count this Sneasler out of the fight just yet, just knowing that there could be a spanner thrown in the works here. But this Corviknight doesn't want to stick around to find out whether or not the Overheat would connect anyway, because it's going to be Annihilate that comes in to take its place.
It might just be sacrificed to an Eruption here. Dire Claw comes through. And the activation, Paralysis. That might be big here. Will it be able to attack this turn? And
no,
it can't!
It can't! That's the Dire Claw shenanigans we were talking about here. Where there's a Dire Claw, there is a way. There is going to be an Overheat connecting onto the Annihilate, though, but Annihilate is also one of those Pokemon that has pretty good natural bulk. So it's going to be able to stick around through that, despite the fact that it was an Overheat in the Sun.
it does have great natural bulk and it does survive, especially considering these Final Gambit sets often put heavy training into those HP points. But notably, it does not have the option to go for Final Gambit anymore. Of course it can, but it will be at much weakened power. It uses your current HP and not your maximum HP, and so the Final Gambit threat is much slower. And of course the Overheat Eject Pack combo does go off and Jump Left does hit the field.
But Annihilate still has a Choice Scarf, and it hasn't moved just yet, so it could go for the coaching play that you were talking about before we headed into the game.
You have to wonder if coaching Dire Claw is enough to knock out the Typhlosion from here. Also notably for Joe, though, because Eruption didn't go off, I do believe he gets the option to switch what move he locks into. So even though you've lost some HP here and might lose a little bit more, possibly you could opt for a Heat Wave instead. It can't be reduced by the lack of HP. But really unfortunate there. The Paralysis meant that the Eruption didn't go off. Possibly could have knocked out Annihilate, and of course broken the Focus Sash on the Sneasler.
But the Sneasler is just going to go for the Protect, as it is going to keep itself safe from the Sleep Powder, from the Jump Bluff. Jump Bluff is still going to be very fast, particularly because it does have the Chlorophyll ability activated in the sun. And this Annihilate just goes for the close combat. It wants to be able to get some amount of meaningful damage done before it potentially gets knocked out, as Typhlosion locks into Eruption, and this time actually gets a chance to move through that paralysis.
We'll be able to knock out this Annihilate, especially because of that close combat special defense drop. And now that Lorenzo knows it has locked into that Eruption, if you're able to get a little bit more damage on it in the coming turns, that might be enough for Typhlosion to be firing off some of the saddest Eruptions we've ever seen. Taking the Pokemon advantage, though, is great for Joe. You know, even though you have this paralyzed Typhlosion, you've used the Eject Pack, you do have the what's it called, Jump Bluff on the field still. Sneasler did just protect in front of it, so you do have to worry about that possible Encore. But of course, Garchomp hits the field, will be resisting that Eruption and threatening some Earthquake damage right back.
There's still that Corviknight in the back, though. So there is a possibility to be able to switch in the Corviknight. The only problem is that you know you're going to have to deal with this Eruption coming out from the Typhlosion before you get a chance to maybe even do some damage to it with this Garchomp.
That's true. It's going to be tough here. This is certainly no walk in the park for either trainer just yet. There are so many things that still could go wrong. You know, of course, the option for full paralysis is still there. The Sneasler stays in the field and will get encored into Protect.
So it fails the double Protect here, which is not going to be super great for it, but with the Breaking Swipe, you are going to be able to do some pretty meaningful spread damage to either of these Pokemon. Biggest thing, though, is that knowing that this Typhlosion is locked into Eruption, you're helping to reduce its HP pool to make sure that this Eruption isn't going to hurt nearly as much. But this Sneasler is still going to take a pretty big beating from that.
It is, and especially considering, you know, it's locked into Protect right now. If it stays on the field, it will be doing no damage. It's tough to switch the Corviknight in here. I think you did probably have to leave the Sneasler there just to make sure that Corviknight doesn't take a big fire move on the switch. But at the same time, the Corviknight is now a really nice switch in because the Garchomp should be able to knock out Typhlosion pretty easily, and Corviknight does have safety goggles which will protect it from Sleep Powder.
This is a really difficult turn, though, because you are going to see the Sleep Powder miss into the Garchomp, and the Garchomp is just naturally faster. So that's a double knockout here onto the Typhlosion and the Jump Bluff. There was an opportunity here for Joe to be able to go for something like the Tailwind to allow the Typhlosion to outspeed, but now you've gotten both of your Pokemon knocked out, and you're left with Choco and your own Garchomp.
Yeah, that was tough. Joe's not had the best Sleep Powder luck so far in this set. It didn't matter game one, but that could have been a crucial one, because if Typhlosion's able to get off an Eruption there, that possibly leaves Garchomp in Leaf Storm range, so you can finish it off with that Jump Bluff. Now you've got your Garchomp and Torkoal on the field, and with the possibility of that Corviknight in the back, it might be a little bit difficult for Joe to take it down because, you know, you can Terastallize into the Dragon type. If Lorenzo wins a speed tie here and gets a Breaking Swipe off, is it -1 attack for the rest of the game? And this Torkoal, of course, has no boosting item. It's used that Eject Pack. If you go for an Overheat once, you're at -2 for the rest of the game.
Based on the amount of damage, though, that we ended up seeing in that first game, even with the Breaking Swipe, I feel like it's still going to be enough to actually get the knockout onto the Garchomp that Lorenzo has. It's just not super healthy at this point in game number 2.
Terra Flying, though, does come in here. Will be very useful because you allow yourself to go for Earthquakes, and of course you're dodging Earthquakes used on Lorenzo's end. 2 Protects coming through, though. Sneasler just staying on the field saying, hey, I don't mind. I can be locked into Protect.
I mean, because it's still buying some very valuable time here for Lorenzo, and you don't want your Corviknight to have to take too much damage.
Yeah.
The sun's going to be expiring pretty soon, which will certainly help versus this Torkoal. We're going to see the knockout on the Sneasler finally, but is it too little too late here as the sunlight is going to fade away?
Yeah, sunlight going down there, not the best timing for Torkoal because it was forced to enter the field right before. There will be no sun, no boosted overheats or burning jealousies for the rest of the game. And now it might just be another situation where speed time might be a huge factor here. If Joe is able to attack with his Garchomp before Lorenzo and a Dragon Claw knocks out Lorenzo's Garchomp, that's so much offense lost for Lorenzo. And of course this Corviknight, if you Terrastallize, will be weak to Dragon Claw. If you don't Terrastallize, it is weak to Overheat. So it's really stuck in a tough position right now.
Ooh, but I love this play. Torkoal has so much flexibility when it's able to have the supportive role in the team. So with a helping hand to make sure that this Garchomp can dish out just a little bit more damage, it's going to be very helpful to at least bypass the Breaking Swipe attack drop, as it's going to be Lorenzo's Garchomp that wins the speed tie.
Speed tie is won, Breaking Swipe is used. Take a lot of damage from Rough Skin and Life Orb, but it doesn't really matter here. Earthquake will come through. Thanks to Terra Flying, only Lorenzo's Garchomp will be taking damage, and it should be enough for a KO. But we haven't seen the action Corviknight has taken yet. If a Brave Bird is able to possibly KO Garchomp here, then you can use that Terrestrialization to block the Torkoal out from doing damage and win the game.
Although here comes the Brave Bird, and it is going to be able to get the KO onto the Garchomp. Little bit of rough skin damage in response to being able to take that physical attack. But now you've got to play this game where Joe's luck has really not been in his favor. You're going to have to go for something like the Burning Jealousy here if you want to try to ensure the damage hits the Corviknight. Or you go for an Overheat again, but you're already at that attack drop.
You are, and the issue now is this Corviknight has the option to Terrastallize into a Dragon type once again. Only fire moves available from this Torkoal on Joe's side. No sunlight, no boosted damage, no boosting item either. So this Corviknight should be able to wall out this Torkoal, especially since it has Roost. Any damage it takes from Brave Bird Recoil, from an Overheat, from a Burning Jealousy, can just be roosted right away. And now this Overheat will come through and really do nothing at all to this Corviknight.
If you end up seeing something like a crit that could come through from here, then maybe that's one way that you could win the game. But Joe sees the writing on the wall, is going to just lock in the forfeit for this game number 2. And huge credit to Lorenzo to being able to find that out in that game 2, make that adjustment to go for the Sneasler, and just Dire Claw away.
Well, especially after the Sneasler was Encored into Protect, I think a lot of players would be tempted to just immediately switch it out. You know, I have this Pokemon that can't get anything done on the field, like why would I keep it in? But knowing that a Fire type could have easily roasted that Corviknight as it switched in if Lorenzo wasn't careful, and I think also identifying this Sneasler isn't really doing a whole lot for me anymore. I think it's actually a really smart play to just leave it on the field, stall out that Encore, you know, if it happens to survive those 3 turns while it's Encored, and then you can go for, you know, close combats or Dire Claws, then great. If not, it just gets knocked out and you can safely bring in that Corviknight. So really smart to hold his nerve and not get freaked out by that Encore. Of course, you know, the Sleep Powder is missing on Joe's end. Not the biggest stroke of luck. I think if that hits, then maybe the game can go a little bit differently. But credit to Lorenzo for making sure that he, you know, kept his wits about him, kept all of his win cons in check, and is able to take this to a deciding game 3.
As game 3 approaches, we get a chance to see the leads, and once again, we are going to see a switch up from Joe. It is going to be the Jumpluff alongside that Hisuian Typhlosion, and Lorenzo is going to be kicking off this game 3 with Sneasler and Garchomp.
I like this lead a lot from both trainers. I think the Typhlosion lead can just catch you really off guard if you're not prepared for it. But the Jumpluff there is able to set up Tailwind first, except Sneasler is faster than Jumpluff without the sun. So if you want that speed boost, you want the Tailwind to go up, you kind of have to switch in Torkoal, which might be able to be taken advantage of if you're Lorenzo with something like a Sonic Tantrum or Earthquake. Of course, even if you do get Tailwind up, Garchomp resists that Eruption, and Sneasler does have the Focus Sash. So a lot of flexibility here from Lorenzo in this lead.
Yeah, I mean, if you go for Earthquake, then your Sneasler's just going to survive, which is actually a really cool play that you could see, being able to just deal some damage to your own Pokemon. But we'll have to find out if that's what Lorenzo has decided to do, as Torkoal hitting the field is going to activate that Chlorophyll ability for Jumpluff to give it the speed that it needs.
The speed will be boosted by the Chlorophyll ability because Sun is up, and Tailwind further boosts the speed. Not too useful this turn, but sets up Joe for the remainder of this game.
It's going to just be a close combat. I mean, Torkoal isn't going to be too phased by that, but with the HP pool that this Torkoal is now at, it just gets this stomping tantrum to double up into that slot and knock it out before it even gets a chance to move. You gotta hope if you're Joe that setting up the Sun was enough for that Torkoal to accomplish in this game 3.
I really like that play from Lorenzo too. Like, if you were paying attention, he did opt to close combat a Ghost type on purpose, but knowing that if Typhlosion stayed in, it would have had to take a Stomping Tantrum after that close combat, which would have been enough to knock it out. The Torkoal coming in is just knocked out by the combination of those 2 moves, whereas just one of them wouldn't have. So I think that's a really smart double up there. You're not getting a whole lot done into this jump left because it is holding that Covert Cloak. You can't fake it out. You can't even go for the Dire Claw paralysis onto it. And Tailwind does go up, so now this Typhlosion is threatening a whole lot of damage. And you have the jump left there with the Leaf Storm to either supplement damage into Garchomp, hoping for a KO, or to break the Focus Sash of that Sneasler.
Well, that's what Terra is for, because we are going to see the Hisuian Typhlosion get a chance to boost up its damage even further. Again, similar strategy to what Joe used in that game number 1 to make sure that those eruptions were just too much.
The Sun there means that this will be boosted even further, but Leaf Storm also misses!
Joe's luck has been absolutely devastating in this 3-game set, missing so many Leaf Storms, so many Sleep Powders, and that Leaf Storm could have been a huge difference there to make sure that this Focus Sash wasn't going to keep this Sneasler around.
Yeah, if it connected, this Dire Claw would never have gone off. That is so much damage into Typhlosion, and Poison Touch activates. It will be poisoned and lose even more HP at the end of this turn. Stomping Tantrum, though, will finish off that KO right away. And that is really unlucky, Rosemary. The Leaf Storm missing means that the Focus Sash stays intact. Sneasler is able to get that Dire Claw off. And even the Garchomp, like, that could have been a damage roll. Possibly a little bit more damage could have knocked it out prior to that Stomping Tantrum. Of course, the Life Orb will knock out the Garchomp in the end, but a rough stroke of luck there because now Joe is down to his final 2 Pokemon, and Lorenzo still has 3 left.
I just don't know if that was a trade that was super worthwhile there for Joe. Yes, the Garchomp is going to be able to switch in here. But it's going to be the Corviknight that's going to be on the other side. And
Corviknight is in such a good spot. The Fire-type Pokemon are gone. You're facing down a Dragon Ground type and a Flying Grass type, all of which Corviknight loves to see. There is like nothing here that can actually damage Corviknight anymore. And especially with the safety goggles, you don't have to worry about Sleep Powders either.
No, this Corviknight is just in such a strong position. You did see Joe opt to go for the Dragon Claw into this Corviknight. If it did Terrasilize to the Dragon type, then you wouldn't be able to do that super effective damage, but there's really no reason to do that. And this Brave Bird is just going to get the knockout onto the jump left. And just like that in this game number 3, Joe is down to his final Pokemon.
This is going to be really hard, if not impossible. Even like you have Roost on Corviknight, and like sometimes you can try and catch it roosting with a ground type move, which when it removes its flying typing. But the Garchomp being faster, it means that even if it does go for a roost, the flying type is lost after Garchomp attacks and is restored at the end of the turn. So there's just no way to damage this Corviknight. Close combat even itself does so much damage coming out from this Sneasler. I think will knock itself out with that. Oh, yeah, the Poison Touch! The Rough Skin will get another knockout here into that Sneasler, but the Poison Touch, if the game wasn't sealed already, Rosemary, that just did it. The Garchomp has, I think, only one more turn left on the field after this one. And after we see this Roost coming in, it's going to be impossible for this Garchomp to break through the Corviknight.
It's just so tough here. I mean, you've got the Garchomp that is going to get knocked out to another poison. You've got the Tailwind that's also gone, and Lorenzo still has another Pokemon in the back. And the Annihilate with this Choice Scarf is going to be faster.
Yeah, we have, imagine using a Final Gambit into an 8 HP Garchomp just to make sure the job gets done. Yeah, obviously this Corviknight and Annihilate will be able to finish off the game against the Garchomp here. Close combat seals the deal as Lorenzo moves on to 3-0 at Louisville Regionals.
What a back and forth. What a roller coaster